There is a pretty good excuse for an individual not to think through their actions, and their decisions. Because you can be under a lot of stress. Circumstances in your life could force you to make decisions without thinking them through. I always hear people saying, so and so is not clever, so and so is not intelligent. Well, I have a different view. All human beings were given a brain to use. And the brain is like a muscle. If you don't exercise it, it dies. And so according to me, when people make wrong decisions, I don't say they're stupid. I don't say they're not intelligent. What I simply say, and this is the truth, they fail to think through their decisions. And anybody can do that. And this thing of people failing to think through their decisions is very common in modern life. Instant coffee, instant switch, instant change of channels. The brain almost becomes dead. People don't read anymore. Anyway, my point is, while it is okay for an individual not to think through their decisions, there's absolutely no excuse, zero excuse, for a government to fail to think through what they're doing, especially when it comes to major policy decisions. And unfortunately, in East Africa, in fact in the whole of Africa, but today I want to focus on two East African countries, we have evidence that governments have completely fallen asleep on the job, failed to think through what they're doing. And these governments have the best advisors that money can buy. So there's no excuse there. It all boils down to a few individuals, or individuals in the form of leaders, being stubborn, and making a decision, insisting on making a decision without thinking it through carefully. More so because what you do affects millions of innocent people, citizens in your country. Now, the truth is, all three East African countries are very guilty of this. But today I'll spare Uganda, and I'll focus on Kenya, where a decision that was made by the government that came into power in 2013 is now coming to bite them, and to bite them in a major way, after causing massive suffering amongst Kenyans. And of course, I'll also touch on Tanzania, because even if you're a dictator, a draconian dictator, you still have brains. You still have the best advisors money can buy. Use them and think through what you're doing. So let's start with Tanzania, and the latest development in the kidnapping of an individual called Mdude Nyangali, who's a harsh critic of the government of John Pombe Magufuli, and a member of the main opposition party, Chadema. You will remember that Bwana Nyangali was kidnapped from his shop in the southern part of Tanzania at a place called Mbozi, in the Songwe area. And he went screaming and kicking, calling for help, as this very heavily armed and masked men took him away in two vehicles. Well, God is good and God is great, because Mdude Nyangali has been found alive, abandoned in a bush near a village called Makwenje, in western Mbeya, which is almost 200 kilometers away from where he was kidnapped. Predictably, he was tortured, and he can't even speak, and he has been rushed to hospital for treatment. And we wish him a quick recovery. But my point here is that this is not the first kidnapping that has taken place since the government of John Pombe Magufuli took over in 2015. There have been kidnappings, disappearances, bodies washed up from the ocean, and even high-profile attempted assassinations. Of course, I'm talking about opposition chief whip Tundu Lissu. And now it has become very obvious. Indeed, even when Mdude Nyangali was taken, it was obvious who had taken him. Everybody knew it was the government. Now, since President Magufuli took over, it was his policy to shut down the opposition. And he said so in several speeches. It was also his policy to gag the media. And several media houses have been shut down. Now, President Magufuli was elected by Tanzanians, although there are many who doubt his election. The opposition clearly said there was rigging, and there's plenty of evidence to suggest that. Anyway, He was elected. And so, he has a right to make the policies he sees fit on behalf of the voters and indeed the entire country which elected him. However, did this man, who some call Dr. John Pombe Magufuli, because he has a PhD, did this man sit down and think through what he was doing? Did he take the time to simply ask, if he was not aware and if he didn't see, what happened to President Daniel Arap Moi when he practiced the same tactics in Kenya in the 80s and 90s? Because if President Magufuli had taken just a few minutes to analyze what has happened to other draconian dictators all over the continent, then he would have thought twice about his policies. You know, with the advent of social media, the world has become a very tiny village. And Magufuli should know that he cannot get away with even a half the things Moi got away with in the 80s. Anybody would have told him that what he was attempting to do in Tanzania, what he has already done in Tanzania, would sooner or later catch up with him. Because as I make this video, nobody is talking about the way Magufuli has fought corruption in Tanzania very effectively. Very few people are talking about that. Indeed, the only people who are talking about that are his sycophants. Instead, what the voters are talking about in Tanzania are the kidnappings and killings of Tanzanians. And of course, the latest kidnapping is that of Mdude Nyangali, which happens now, just a few months to a presidential election in Tanzania. Yes, Tanzania going to the polls next year. Just a matter of months from today. Because we're already in the 5th month of the year 2019. We're in May 2019. Now, some naive person somewhere may ask me, Chris, what are you talking about? What does it matter what people are talking about? What matters is how people vote. Let me explain. And let me start with a simple example of something that happened right here in Kenya in the 80s. There's a man who was called General Retired Jackson Mlinge, a very development-minded Kenyan, and he was also very powerful, having served for decades as the Chief of General Staff, the head of the military in Kenya. And one day in the 80s, he vied for a parliamentary seat against the incumbent, a man called Paul Ngei, who had no development record to speak of. And during a campaign rally, he started pointing out to the people the development he had brought to the area. He said, you see this tarmac road? That's me. You see this and this development project? That's me. Do you know what people responded every time he mentioned his development projects? They responded in the Kamba dialect. They said, Osa. That means, take whatever development you have brought to us. Take it with you. We don't need it, and we don't need you. That is politics. That is human nature. And obviously, this is not the first time it had happened. Neither is it going to be the last time it has happened in history. And therefore, I can see in Tanzania a very similar thing happening. Magufuli campaigning for re-election next year, and people telling him, your development, take it with you. Your SGR, pack it up and take it with you. We don't want you and we don't want your development. Why? Because you murder and you kidnap. Why? Because we are hungry. Investors have fled the country in droves as a result of Magufuli policies. Right now, the Tanzanian economy is going through the hardest bit it has ever gone through for decades. Older Tanzanians are saying even the Ujamaa days were better, because at least people had money in their pockets that had value. The problem was there were no goods or products to buy in the country. It is just mind-boggling that John Pombe Magufuli has been running Tanzania like a high school, like he's dealing with young students in a school, that he has to discipline and bend to his will, for a better Tanzania, according to him. What? How does that work? You tell me. How does that work? This is why as we head to the polls in Tanzania next year, it's going to be super interesting. Of course, some will say the election results are obvious. They're already known today, because Magufuli controls everything. And he has even changed the laws. He has full control of the electoral body. He even has control of opposition parties, according to a recent bill passed. Through the registrar of political parties, who is taking instructions from him. However, despite all that, and with Sudan still in our minds, what has happened in Sudan, it doesn't matter what you control. It doesn't matter whether you control the whole military, you control the electoral body, you control the opposition. That doesn't matter. If the people stand up and say, no, we don't want you, take your SGR and go away, take your development record and go away, take your so-called factories, because Magufuli promised factories, and the only factories we have seen developing in Tanzania are factories of corruption amongst traffic police, something which was never there before Magufuli. A brand new corruption industry. But apart from that, all investors, local and foreign, a vast majority of them, have left the country. And those still in the country have cut down on the expansion. Bottom line, even if Magufuli does a pop, and is a re-elected president next year, his second term, is going to grow very old. Because he's going to be limping from crisis after crisis after crisis. And of course, all this is as a result of his policies. Period. Tanzanians are very peaceful people. They're very docile. They can take just about anything. From a draconian leader. However, when you start killing, when you start kidnapping, when you start attempting to assassinate opposition leaders, ngoja tu, utajua ujui. And that's not a threat. I'm simply pointing to what history tells me. I'm simply pointing to what human nature tells me. Now on to Kenya, where there's exactly the same problem, but very different circumstances. Now, when the Jubilee government took over, the Uhuruto government took over in 2013, I want you to cast your minds back to the very first things they did while in office. They rushed to pass legislation, to clamp down on media freedom. They tightened control of NGOs operating in the country. And they created a situation where they put all non-governmental organizations operating in the country on a very short leash. They wanted to know where their financing is coming from, etc., etc. Now, looking back, we now know why they were doing that. The answer today is as clear as day. The whole idea was that this government was about to embark on the largest looting and theft of taxpayers' money in the history of the country. I will quote patriot John Githongo, who says, never before in our history have so few people stolen so much. That is very accurate. Now, on the surface of things, the Jubilee government was very clever on how they were going to go about it. Because while all this was happening, they deliberately went out of their way to make sure they throw a few scraps to the people of Kenya. And there were many scraps, or quite a few. One of them was that Kenyan women going into maternity would no longer have to pay a single cent to deliver their bundle of joy. This policy decision touched millions of Kenyans who were very impressed with the Jubilee government and who were for a while blinded as to what was really happening. But again, if the Uhuruto government then had taken just a few minutes to think through their major policy decisions and what they were doing, they would have known that this thing was not going to work and that it was going to backfire on them very badly. Now you can understand where a government which brought us so many good policies which touched so many Kenyans had a major problem being re-elected in 2017. In fact, the problem was so serious that there was no way they were going to be elected on the ballot. They had to use other means. Remember? Pop, 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 elected. And I have a confession to make. Yeah, most of you will know that the Kumekucha brand was revived in 2016, the run-up to the 2017 general elections. And I can assure you, I did not come back into politics because there was a looming general election. No way. This job is just crazy. Even an election like that will not tempt you to come back. But that's a story for another day. Now, as I was coming back, initially, I was very sure the Jubilee government would have absolutely no problem getting re-elected. Because although I was out of politics, I was still talking to people in Kenya. Yeah, and some of the things the Jubilee government did were good. Yeah, they touched on the lives of many Kenyans. And at that time, in my view, the opposition was making very fatal mistakes, in opposing the government and even in preparing for the general elections. However, as I started talking to people around, talking politics, as opposed to talking about, how have you benefited, etc., etc., I was shocked. I started seeing some very clear animosity towards the Jubilee government. Now, all these problems that Jubilee was having were, of course, very effectively camouflaged by introducing tribalism, by doing some very effective anti-Raila propaganda. You'll remember, in the run-up to the 2017 elections, we're even told that many people in Central Province believed that if Raila Odinga were to be elected president, all Kikuyus would be forced to wear shorts. Kaptulas. Now, I'm not sure if this was going to be passed through legislation in Parliament or how it was going to be done, but many people in Central Province believed that. They believed that the opposition, and the main opposition figure, of course, was Raila Odinga, was the devil himself. Now, those of you who never understood will understand why the government was so determined that Raila participates in the repeat October elections. They were desperate for Raila to participate. Because without a devil to vote against, many people in the Mount Kenya region saw no reason to waste their time going to cast their votes. Now, as I make this video, Jubilee has some very, very serious problems cooking, right in their own backyard. In the Mount Kenya region, you see some of these policies that Jubilee came into power with, and were very serious about passing very quickly, affected businesses in Kenya in a very bad way. Many businesses were completely, or rather have been completely wiped out. And the truth is, the vast majority of entrepreneurs hail from the Mount Kenya region, from Central Province. That is a fact. And on the ground, people are very angry. There's been a letter, circulating on social media, which I believe most of you have seen, of a very frustrated entrepreneur from Central Province. Reading that letter, this entrepreneur is not even interested in waiting for 2022 to remove the Jubilee government. He wants the Jubilee government gone immediately. Now, the truth is, the Deputy President William Samoei Ruto has been using these sentiments of the ground to his advantage, to rally Central Province voters behind him ahead of the 2022 presidential elections. Never mind that he was the main architect of those policies that have messed up Kenyans. You see, it is human nature when people are in a crisis, they really don't care who's promising to save them. All they want is a way out of their crisis. These anti-Jubilee sentiments have been building up in Central Province for quite some time. And clearly, what I can say is that long before 2022, there is definitely a storm brewing in the Mount Kenya region. That's the truth. And of course, this is very worrying. But it all boils down to what I started with. Governments failing to think through what they're doing. Leaders, powerful leaders, failing to sit down and think through precisely and exactly what they're doing. And admittedly, this problem is rampant all over Africa. Yeah, that's the truth. Until next time, this is Chris Kumekucha.